Okay, my guest this morning is Karlyn Percil-Mercieca, and she's the founder of KDPM Consulting Group and Chief Equity Officer of KDPM Equity Institute, is a visionary catalyst for impactful global change through an ancestral knowledge system lens. As the pioneer behind the groundbreaking L.E.A.P to Equity, Ancestral Leadership and Emotional Intelligence Program, Karlyn reimagines how we view human and cultural equity, going beyond standard diversity, equity, inclusion practices, and anti-racism leadership training. With a foundation in ancestral wisdom and cultural equity-focused learning, Karlyn drives equitable change by helping leaders and employees cultivate psychological safety, emotional intelligence, and personal growth within organizations. Dedicated to cultivating a world where belonging and equity thrive, a world where Black women and all women feel safe enough to flourish, KDPM Group, in partnership with York University, has released a groundbreaking study on workplace well-being, psychological safety in the workplace, focused on Black women at work. Karlyn and the team recently launched KOFA, or KOFA AI, an AI-powered, human-supported coaching and mentorship platform rooted in ancestral knowledge systems, emotional intelligence, and neuroscience. Through the Sister Talk Ubuntu Fellowship Program, she aims to certify 1,000 Black women in ancestral leadership and emotional intelligence through her EQ Clarity coaching program. Ladies and gentlemen in the Reading Circle audience, welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, Karlyn Percil-Mercieca. Karlyn, good morning again.
Good morning. What a beautiful introduction. Good morning to you, Mark, and good morning to everyone who's listening. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for rising early to join me this morning. I was looking forward to speaking with you, especially about the various topics that are in the bio, because my guess is many of my listeners, including in some respects myself, may be unfamiliar with some of the things that we're going to be talking about. And that's what I love, because the show is meant to be entertaining, educational, informing, and inspiring. So all of the above, and I'm looking for that to occur this morning. So, all right, as I said, kind of in terms of my first question usually is kind of like, where did this view, lens, perspective, where did this all begin? How did we get to where we are, like from childhood or teenage, or how did, what led you to all of this that I just read?
Right. It's life always gives us a good opportunity to introduce ourselves at every point in our lives. That's really how I got there. I think the story begins. I was born and raised in St. Lucia in the Caribbean. Have you been to St. Lucia, Mark? Have you heard of St. Lucia?
Oh, I know St. Lucia. I have not been there yet. It's one of the Caribbean islands I have not been yet, but I know very well St. Lucia. Matter of fact, years ago, I talk about life changes. I was in corporate America at AT&T, and there was a product called USA Direct, and that's when I learned all my international spots, was working in that particular job.
Ah, nice. Well, now that you know somebody from St. Lucia, I'm looking forward to giving you a private tour and taking you through the island.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to hold you to that because I love traveling.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I was fortunate and lucky enough to be born in St. Lucia, small island in the Caribbean, in the West Indies. For those of you who may not be familiar, very close to Barbados. And I spent the first 25 years in St. Lucia. We're 238 square miles, one of the top honeymoon destinations, one of the top destinations for anyone who's looking for adventure, wellness, or if you're just looking for, a quick getaway. St. Lucia is really that place. A lot of people describe St. Lucia as, I get to the island and I'm healed and I feel at home and I feel at peace. And so every time people ask me, where are you from? Where did your story start? I always talk about how lucky and privileged I was to be chosen to be born there. So the first 25 years of my life was in St. Lucia. I actually started my career in banking in St. Lucia. And in my 20s, early 20s, I moved to Toronto, Canada. and continued my career in banking. And when I moved to Canada, it might sound strange to you and to many who are listening, it's when I discovered I was Black. And I say that in the sense that in St. Lucia, we don't necessarily have, the constructs around Black and white, and we're really more from a national perspective and connecting on our values as much as, the colonial narrative was present as part of our value system. Blackness as an identity wasn't as pronounced as how I felt when I moved to Toronto. So being put in those different categories really gave me a bit of an identity. I call it an identity culture shock. I started searching for more answers in terms of, well, who am I outside of this imposed identity of Blackness? Because with that imposed identity of Blackness, there was a lot of stereotypes that I found myself navigating my identity through, or trying to understand my purpose through those lens. And I'm not sure about you, Mark, but as a Black woman in Canada, or also in the world, I'm pretty sure there are lots of Black women who might be listening right now who will be able to identify with this misogyny that comes with the imposed identity of Blackness. So I was looking for something that went beyond the Eurocentric lens, that went beyond the white lens, that told me of who I am. Because as far as I knew, when I researched my history, I traced my roots to West Africa. And as much as I don't know how my grandparents got to St. Lucia, of course, part of it being the transatlantic slave trade, I didn't know much. So I went on this quest of trying to understand my identity, who I am, my values. Like I said, not from the imposed identity of Blackness, but what is my cultural inheritance saying, my cultural wealth? And what I found was we didn't have much documentation in terms of, I wouldn't say much documentation, because I went to my first love, which was books. I'm so grateful for all the authors who decided to write, who decided to share their research, and who poured their purpose into a book or research, which really helped me to form a lot of what you're seeing in my bio in terms of understanding ancestral knowledge systems, understanding ancestral wisdom as a pathway to understanding self, understanding purpose. But most importantly, understanding how important it is to have a deep understanding of who you are from those lenses, because it really informs how you see yourself, but also how you move and how you navigate your life through this world.
Absolutely. And you brought up an interesting point that I've heard from folks, particularly from Caribbean islands or from other areas where race per se is not an issue because we just don't see it. Mainly because, and my guess is because everybody on the island for the most part would be, so you don't even look at Black or this. We may be light skinned, dark skinned, this, that, and the other, but we're not looking at it from the standpoint of Black. It's only when you do, like you say, travel around the world and get into other areas where it's considered a differentiator. And it is interesting that we're having this interview given where we are politically in our country and where we are in terms, because now it's almost like we're going backwards because we have made gains and now those gains are being wiped out. Now, going back to the ancestry, and I'm really looking forward to talking about the ancestry because I have actually done the same thing in terms of finding out where did I come from. I know I've gone through two different companies, African Ancestry as well as Ancestry.com, and they're kind of sort of similar. Like on my dad's side, I'm from Guinea-Bissau, and on my mom's side, it traces back to Cameroon. Now, there's a whole lot in between both of those, but the predominant areas would be West Africa, which is the Guinea-Bissau, and then you had Cameroon. So that much I've got, and I've gone all the way back to like the 1700s in terms of the, family tree and all that kind of good stuff. But it is important to get a feel for, where did we start? Because, we get a lot of folks from the various islands and so forth and so on. We try to help people out. You need to understand those boats were traveling and they were stopping on these various islands. And so we had the various, slavery and being dropped off in all of these islands. So when folks start debating, who and what they are, you're like, no, you originated from the same place.
Exactly.
It's just that the boat stopped. It got to your island before it got to the United States. So, but that is critical because and listening audience knows, and I don't know if Io had shared it with you or not, if Dr. Io Sakai shared it with you or not, but during my day job, I am a principal. So I deal with kids. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I'm constantly telling them is you have got to know your history. Like one of the reasons we do some of the stuff that we do, and when I'm talking about stuff, I'm talking about some of the stupid stuff that we do, because we don't know our history. We don't understand our history. And if we did, if you understood your history, you wouldn't be doing that.
Exactly. You'd find an opportunity to affirm versus, not affirm. And speaking of Dr. Io, it was such a pleasure and honor to meet her, talking about someone who affirms women and individuals. I had the pleasure of meeting her through another brilliant Black woman, Kim Lubin, who introduced me to Dr. Io. And that's what's really great about Black women who know who they are and where they come from. They are always seeking to affirm and uplift other Black women. So if there's one thing that I would say for, folks, you talk about people doing, stupid things and because, we haven't really affirmed who we are.
Correct.
Or in some cases, we end up affirming ourselves, Mark, from the lens of that imposed identity. And again, like I said, that comes with a lot of negative stereotypes.
Correct.
And when you see yourself through the lens of your cultural inheritance and your cultural wealth, if anything, you decenter that one narrative of, you coming from slavery or your ancestors come from slavery. And while this is one of our stories, it's not our entire story.
Absolutely.
So I find when we decenter that narrative of the imposed identity of Blackness and we understand our, African ancestry from the lens of our cultural inheritance, you realize, oh my gosh, not only there is so much to learn and absorb, you also realize that we are cultural innovators. Our creative capital is
absolutely. Absolutely.
So
it really is. And that's why I am fascinated about it. And I people, when I say this, this is all right. First off, let me put this out there. Because folks are pro-Black does not mean they're anti-white.
Oh,
they needs to
say that again.
That needs to be said, that because you're pro-Black does not mean you're anti-white. And a lot of times it is taken that way. And it's not meant to be, but it's just like you're proud of who you are, we ought to be proud of who we are. Dr. Naeem Akbar has a book, and I reference it quite frequently, Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery. And in that book, he talks about how we ought to be just as much and just as energetic about praising ourselves and looking and promoting our greatness as any other group. In other words, what he says is with the Caucasian group, there is nowhere they can look and turn where they don't see their greatness. We ought to be about the same thing, that we ought to have as many things surrounding us and statues and everything else that talk about our greatness. Now, one word you just used was imposed, which I loved, because that's exactly right. A lot of what's imposed upon us is what we take in, comparing to really kind of understanding and researching who we are and operating from that.
Yes. And also to make the effort, and thank you for sharing, because that's another book now I'm going to add to my list. Especially in my practice, one of the things that I learned going back to affirming, I'm pretty sure, we've all heard of the phenomenon of, if you look for markers where you don't belong, you'll find it. But if you look for markers to affirm yourself, you also find it as well, right? And that's the beauty of our brain. What we attune it to, it prioritizes. So even in my practice, one of the things that I've done is constantly look for narratives that affirm my Blackness and my wholeness through the lens of, like Dr. Io and Ken and her work and, and this author that you just mentioned, who I'm going to add to my list. This is really what also informs my practice around not just ancestral leadership and wisdom, but looking at ancient knowledge systems as a functional but also sustainable knowledge system that I can constantly go back to when I'm looking for narratives or I'm looking for examples. Because what's really interesting about using, mainstream narrative or the Eurocentric lens, it's still very rooted in the Eurocentric lens. And I'm pretty sure you're aware of that. A lot of the mainstream research, whether it's around organizational theory or leadership or emotional intelligence, they don't quote the Dr. Ayo Sakai. They don't
Correct.
quote, Mark. They don't quote, like just how you just quoted this author. They don't center their work. So again, you find yourself, I call it this identity anorexia, right? It's like you're constantly chasing, or you're constantly looking for, you're adding to the narrative as opposed to, oh, I see myself centered here, so I can just be affirmed. No, everywhere you go, if anything, you're being maybe unaffirmed is not a word, but you know what I mean?
I know
You're being
exactly what you mean.
in some way, because examples being used, it doesn't center the research. And even when I, have an opportunity to speak to other, thought leaders, whether it's on psychological safety or, like I said, leadership, when I ask them questions around, well, how would you now factor in a lens of someone who happened to have, let's say, a Caribbean or an African roots, because your research didn't quote, anyone from that knowledge base. A lot of times they don't have an answer. So if we don't take the time to affirm ourselves and each other, you're constantly looking at yourself through a Eurocentric lens that doesn't center you, doesn't center your whole humanity. So you're almost like you're outside of yourself chasing for worthiness, which in itself, it has a negative impact on one's psychological safety and well-being.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, it's like, that's why, going back to breaking the chains of psychological slavery, a lot of the habits and patterns, and that's why he titles the book the way that he does, a lot of it is passed along, and it's passed along without us even understanding where it really started from. And so we just keep on doing things over and over again, not understand. Like, in other words, why are we always late? Wow. I mean, literally, they have like, I mean, I tell people, the whole, like, they literally named a time, CPT, colored people time, because of us being late. Why do we eat some of the foods that we eat? Why not understanding? Do you understand some of these foods were passed down because that's what we were given during slavery? Mm-hmm. That was the scraps, the leftovers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so we just think we have to keep on eating that. Like, no, you don't. You don't have to eat fatback. You don't have to eat chitlins. You don't have to eat whatever the scraps were that was during that particular time frame that just continue to get passed down. But again, that takes, kind of thinking, and it kind of takes doing some research, so forth and so on. Or you're just like, well, let's think about this for a minute. Like, why do you think these patterns occur? And so you're absolutely right from the Eurostate, because see, for me, and like I said, this is what I was getting ready to say a couple of minutes ago, I have no problem saying I am an unapologetically proud Black man. Don't want to be anything else. Would not want to be else. Now, at the same time, I don't have a problem if somebody said they was an unapologetically Caucasian Italian man. I mean, what but see, this is where the problem comes in. When you want to be unapologetically proud of who you are, but you want to keep me from being unapologetically proud of who I am, that's where the issues come in.
Yeah. So going back to the patterns, right? Because the body remembers. And when we look at going back to the social construct, or when, and even when I, have the opportunity in front of my clients, it's not just the imposed identity of Blackness, it's also the imposed identity of whiteness as well, right? We all have to do a reclaiming of our whole selves from the narrative of whether it's the caste system or, it's white supremacy. We have to name it in order for us to claim it, right?
Correct.
Kem Lubin had this really great quote with Dr. Ayo. We had this Ride Sister webinar recently, and if you haven't had a chance to check it out, please do. So many gems were dropped, but Kem said something that stuck with me, where she said that you cannot rename what you don't claim. You cannot name what you don't claim. So we have to claim. So I have to claim my Blackness in order for me to name it, in order for me to own it. And it's the same for folks as well who have been racialized as white. It's like, claim your Italian or your Irish or, whatever ancestry it is. Because when we do so, what we end up doing is that we end up expanding the humanity spectrum because the one we inherited, again, it was rooted in a inferiority model. I'm better than you, not just based on our phenotype, but also, based on a lot of the narratives that's in every single textbook. It's in every single academic book. It's passed down. It's really trickled. When people say that
yes,
is working as it is, it's literally passed down in every single, system that we would, as the education system, medical, even walking, going shopping, right? It's all there. So in some way, especially as someone who's lucky to be born of African descent, because I'm like you, Mark. I tell people all the time, I'm like, listen, I am so lucky I was born Black. You just don't understand how lucky and how proud I am to have been born of African descent, because I couldn't think of being born any other way. And I'm pretty sure every other race can say that.
And they do. But just like I said, where the issue comes in, at least for me, and that could be, but I don't think so. The issue comes in whenever you're trying to negate the other groups. You're proud of your group, but you want to negate the contributions of, or the existence of, in particular, I'll use ours as for Black people, because like I said, we're seeing it again. Yeah. That's why you have all these book bannings and all these other things that's coming about, because you literally, people are trying to keep history from being, because this, as an educator, I don't understand how you can, the definite education in and of itself, that the banning of books is counter to what education is.
It's counter. And not just that. What not worries me, but what fascinates me is for everyone who's, voting towards banning books or against, anyone who's claiming the full identity and the full humanity, they are voting like consciously towards the moral decay. I'm like, you are consciously. Anytime you ban a book, anytime you hold yourself and your whiteness back, you're actually voting towards your own moral decay.
This is true.
And as much as, and even the narrative, and that's one of the things with my work, Mark. The brilliance of reframing has really helped in terms of understanding psychological safety, not just as a practice, but it's actually an affirmation in some way. Because usually when we talk about, racism or misogyny, we often talk about what others have said or done to us.
Correct.
But the reframe I offer my clients that I coach and I work with, I remind them that you have to remember the first act of racism. Yes, there is a psychological impact, a psychological violence. We're not denying it. But actually the first harm is against self.
Correct.
Against the person who have done the act.
Correct. Right? See, this is why with the book banning argument, and again, this was one of the arguments, because there was a few arguments that were made, but one of the arguments that were being made was the harm it would do to Caucasian kids to learn this information. And my pushback on that would always be, well, how could learning that be more harmful than the people who lived it?
Exactly.
Like, how could your child learning about that, and again, that's why I know that was a bogus argument, because like, how could your child learning about it be more harmful than the children and the families who experienced it? Mm-hmm. And as you were talking... Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I was going to say, because by that very admission, what you're saying is that it's okay for Black kids to experience it, but it's not okay. But it's not okay for. So again, you're actually showing your bias in terms of who you have on the pedestal in terms of who's human and who's not, right? And
correct.
And that's really when people say that, I'm like, have you listened to yourself?
Correct.
You're really voting against your own IQ in so many different ways, right?
That's absolutely right. Now, I was telling you about Naeem's book. I mean, Dr. Wade Noble's, he also has a book, From Black Psychology to the Science of Being. Now, one of the things about Dr. Isle, a lot of what we're talking about, the books are on Universal Right Publications.
Yeah.
A lot of these things. And you keep talking about Kim. Kim is actually scheduled to be on the show as well. She's coming up in a couple of weeks, I think. It might even be next week. I got to look at the calendar, but I know she's scheduled to appear as well. But But again, that's one of the, like, and Dr. Io and I have known each other for like years, like 20 plus years now. And I've seen the growth and the development and the progress of universal right. But these books on here they get exactly at what we are talking about. Like I said, one of them was Wade Noble's book, From Black Psychology to the Science of Being. We have Being Human. And a lot of the authors who are in Universal Right have appeared on the show, which has been great because I've had the opportunity to talk to them.
Amplifying that.
Exactly. Dr. Malefe, Kete Asante, he's been on. I've had Dr. Dove, she's been on. She has a whole curriculum for the Afrocentric school. So all of these things are available at Universal Right. If you go to uwpbooks.com, they're all there. And exactly what we're talking about, because one of the books is called We Will Tell Our Own Story, and that's exactly what you and I are doing right now. And if we don't do it, as I say, people get squeamish about talking about it because, there's a company or they've coined the phrase courageous conversations. We have got to have these courageous conversations.
Yes. And we have been, right? And this is, even for myself, recently I was published on UWP Press under the researcher. I wrote an article towards Black women, reminding them to keep leading with ancestral power, cultural wisdom, and purpose, because I've noticed also that there's a gap in terms of the brilliance of Black women.
Yes.
In terms of not being affirmed for their innovation capital, for their creative capital. Like you said, all of the things that we've talked about, that we've mentioned, usually when you're in predominantly white spaces, especially in the corporate space, you're not affirmed for your linguistic capital, your navigational capital. In many cases, a lot of executive coaches don't have the leadership or the expertise in terms of understanding this. So there's always also the harm of a lot of Black leaders in the workplace being coached from a deficit point of view or from a lower IQ point of view, human IQ point of view, because they're still being held at this. And I'll give you an example. I remember I spoke to this Black gentleman, a very senior role, and he was asking me, how do I navigate? An executive coach told him, the feedback she gave him and the assignment she gave him was, you're a tall Black man and people might be intimidated. So can you smile more, or, can you, just be a little bit more, more, subdued so people don't think of you as a threat? And when he shared this with me, I couldn't believe that an executive coach told him that. And I'm like, this is actually a misogyny, like that's discrimination.
No, absolutely right. You know what's interesting? Keep going, and I'll piggyback on you.
I'll wrap it up, just to say that, and this is when I say either we're being affirmed or we're being unaffirmed, or we're being rerouted in the dehumanization of who we are. As much as we do, and this is why your show is so important, and Dr. I's work and all the authors who go to academia and who do their research, because I know they don't do their research in this, I'm sitting on the beach in St. Lucia and I'm drinking my coconut water. I know it's not all bed and roses and you're on the beach drinking coconut water. They also go through their fair share of racism and misogyny and a lot of, anti-Blackness. And they bring us all this wisdom and brilliance. And we have this information. So I applaud you and Dr. I and everyone who actually do their work, because what you end up doing is that you end up affirming us in a way that is not only universal, but it's one that is so needed. And I want to see us, and I want to see your platform and all the work that's being done on UWP amplified to the umpteenth level.
Absolutely, because interestingly enough, over the last couple of weeks, I've had two conversations with two very articulate, erudite, scholarly women, and both of them happen to be from Jamaica. Two different parts of the state, two different positions. One actually is a guidance counselor in my school. The other one is a councilwoman in her particular community. But both of them carry themselves extremely well. And what happens is they get seen by other women as, and sometimes men, but a lot of them, they'll be seen as snooty. They'll be seen as, who do you think you are? They'll be seen as, cocky. They'll be seen as all these different things only because they're well educated. They have high standards, so forth and so on. And I had this conversation with both of these different women. So, because she asked me, she said, "Do you think I'm stuck up?" I'm like, "No, I don't see you that way at all." But when you carry yourself in a certain way, that's the way many people will see it, and particularly if you're Black.
Yes. And is it okay, Mark, can I just read, because what you just said is exactly why I wrote the article that I just talked about on UWP. And if anyone's listening, go to uwpbooks.com. Under the researcher, you'll find the article. But I'm just going to read you the intro, because this is why I decided to write everything that you just said. So the
Please read it.
Okay, thank you. Dear beautiful warrior, let's pause for a moment and reflect on the essence and brilliance you embody. A presence that may not always be acknowledged by the world, but remains ever present in every space you enter. As Black women, we continuously had to fight for our place in spaces that were designed for us, with us in mind. Yet we thrive, we transform, we lead. And in doing so, we don't just build for today, we create legacies for the future. You are a visionary, a trailblazer, and a leader. It's a long article, and
that's okay.
The reason why I wrote it was I wanted to remind Black women exactly what you just said. Like, am I cocky or too much? And it's like, no, you're not. It's just that we don't affirm each other enough.
Correct.
And even in spaces where we see each other, and I want to say that, right? Because it's true. It's also like the elephant in the room, and actually I do address it in the article. I talk about the innovation capital, and being the strategy queen, and reminding women, sis, you are exactly who you think you are. You walk through this world carrying your experiences and your ancestors' deep, rich, rooted wisdom. This is the Sankofa principle we cannot forget. Your cultural wisdom knots are woven from generations of stories, teachings, expertise, and experiences of those who come before you. This wisdom isn't just a memory, it's a living, breathing force that guides your leadership, shapes your decisions, and empowers you to create. Every choice you make is informed by an ancient strength, a profound knowing that bridges worlds, honoring the past and the future. So I often remind Black women, Mark, you do not have a choice but to hold your head up high, because the body remembers. Yes,
absolutely.
We know about epigenetics. We know, yes, there's the, stories of racism, but we have the stories of creative capital. We have the stories of love. We have the stories of, we keep going even when we're constantly being put down, especially, we don't talk enough about the betrayal when there's someone who looks like you, Mark, and you think you're going to be affirmed, but you get kicked in the gut. We don't talk enough about that because it's there. And it's important for us to talk about it. And we don't talk about it for division. We talk about it because we care and we want us to come together more. So even that betrayal is still there, because you would think the way that you and I, we're just meeting for the first time, but we absolutely agree that our Blackness is one of the most beautiful things, the gifts that we have been given. But there are others who may look like us, but don't agree with that. So they also inflict harm, whether they intend to or not.
That's correct. And like I said, I say that, and I don't care what audience I'm speaking with or speaking to. And I couch it and say, well, it's not meant to be offensive. It's not. And as I said earlier, whenever I gave you that, being pro-Black does not mean you're anti-white. I mean, it says, don't confuse the two, because that's what people want to do. They want, well, if you're for Black, that means you can't be for white. No, that's not what I'm saying. Unfortunately, the reason that thought process goes through is because it does work the opposite way. There are folks who are pro-white who are anti-Black. And that's why probably a lot of the thinking of, well, when you say that must, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm for everybody. I mean, in all honesty. But what I'm not for is somebody trying to make me seem like I'm nobody, which I won't allow to do anyway. But you're going to sit there and act as if, because that's why I was like, so I was not incensed, because I was not surprised. I was saddened, and it was expected. When you start connecting a plane crash to DEI, it made absolutely no sense whatsoever. None. Yet that was the comment that was made. And interestingly enough, you're talking about, the conversation about our own pulling us down. Had a guest a couple weeks ago. Also was recommended to me by Dr. Io was Camille S. Alexander, PhD. Dr. Alexander, and she's an educator in the university system. She talks about how other women, don't affirm university or professors or educators. And we had that conversation a couple of weeks ago. Camille and I was talking to her. She was like, no, that's us bringing us down. That's us who don't believe in us.
Exactly. And that's such, and to be honest, that is also why KDPM Equity Institute exists, right? A lot of our toolkits and our workbooks that we've designed. So we do a lot of training, as you mentioned in my bio, our Leap to Equity program, which is a program that I designed. LEAP is based on an acronym. L stands for listen, E is about emotional intelligence, A is about ancestry, but also asking, and P stands for prioritizing equity, especially cultural equity, us learning our roots and where we're from. And if you go on our website, kdpmequityinstitute.com, you'll see our approach to our work, which is rooted in cultural equity. And we have a toolkit, actually, that we designed for Black professionals thriving in the workplace. And it's actually based on the work of Dr. Cynthia Billard, on the 4 R's in terms of remembering, reimagining, and really understanding ourselves through the lens of our cultural inheritance. And when you say that story, I always bring that story to folks, including the work of Dr. Kim McLear. Her work on psychological safety has inspired me. I'm always looking for Black women's work for me to quote, for me to cite, for me to amplify. And these are the tools and the resources we have available for, employee resource groups, for leaders, especially folks who happen to be coaching others. And this is also why I created the EQ Clarity Coaching Program. Because some folks are asking, Karlyn, how do I integrate? I'm not sure how to do that. And for some folks, they honestly don't know how. So I've designed a coaching certification program as well as training others around ancestral leadership. We took the Kwanzaa principles and I created a coaching framework and an ancestral leadership framework around that as well. So putting into practice, not just what we have learned, but what we have inherited is a huge part of the work. And at KDPM Equity, we're really proud to be the bridge so that we can help folks to convert that into practical and tactical steps so that they can really apply that to their everyday lives.
I know that. Well, I applaud you because it is so needed on a lot of different levels. I mean, we're talking about genderism, we're talking about racism, we're talking about the whole, we're talking about all of that. And like I said, in the current climate, it's going to be needed even more. And so one of the quotes that I have hanging in my office at my school is by Coretta Scott King. And it says, "Women, if the soul of the nation is to be saved, I believe that you must become its soul." I am with Mrs. King on that. Because I have a quote by her husband on one side and I have that quote by her on the other. But it says, "Women, if the soul of the nation is to be saved, I believe that you must become its soul."
Yes. And it means that we have to spend time affirming ourselves.
Yes, it does.
And we have to center our humanity, and also we have to, in the spaces and places where we don't see ourselves being affirmed, you have to find ways to affirm yourself. And this is what we need to, like I always remind women as well, every single day, and everyone, absolutely who's listening, but particularly for Black women, because again, misogyny is something that's not always acknowledged and it's not always spoken about. So I want to always make sure that I am speaking directly to Black women.
No, and again, I'm saying No, I'm saying it's critical, because, and I may be somewhat biased because I'm the father of 2 daughters, and I've also raised 2 stepdaughters. So it was all girls. I couldn't buy a boy, no matter which way I looked at it. No boys were coming through. So I mean, and I constantly affirm and encourage them. You will not allow anyone to tell you what you can or cannot do based on you being a female and based on you being Black. That just will not happen. And so they were born, that was instilled with them since birth. And
one of the affirmations that I have in Black Professionals Life and Career Purpose Guide is my rest, my joy, my peace, and full flourishing of self and our community is also part of the assignment. And the reason why I put that in there is, again, just as you mentioned, you talk about the soul. We forget that the full flourishing of ourselves and our community is a part of the assignment. It's important. Like even right now, with, like you said, everything that's going on, one of the things I've been saying to my sister talk, to my women's group, and the members of my women's group is, notice the distraction, don't get distracted.
Correct.
Notice the distraction.
Correct.
Don't get distracted. Because I believe our ancestors are calling us to return and to remember. Again, going back to the work of Dr. Cynthia B. Dillard, because if we don't have the narrative that center our full humanity, and we're using a Eurocentric lens for rest, for wellness, for understanding community, we will always be emotionally anorexia or emotionally hungry or emotionally, psychologically starving, right? Because we're not using a full lens or full flourishing of self lens to see who we are. So that's why sometimes it's easy for us to marginalize each other. It's easy for us to question what we don't understand. But the one thing that I'll remind us is that our discomfort is not an excuse to disrespect each other.
That is correct. And, you know, it's interesting. And matter of fact, listening audience, I hope you've been with me since 6, but I certainly hope you've been with me since 7. As my guest this morning is Karlyn Percil-Mercieca. And we are talking about issues that are relevant to 7:44 a.m. right here on February 1st, 2025. We're talking, and it connects back and ties back to ancestry, which I think is so important. And I'll tell you what, in my school, I guess I have an all-boys school. It's an all-male school, and it's a leadership school. And I get to do things a little bit differently there because of the design of the school. But one of the things we do on Monday morning is a libation ceremony. And the boys have the opportunity to line up, and anything that they're thankful for or anything they want to acknowledge or recognize, they do that. And then we pour the water into the plant, and everybody in the school yells, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Again, trying to help to connect back to our ancestors. Trying to help them. On any given day, if you come to my school, you'll find me in a dashiki. In terms of, I'm either in the school uniform, a suit, or the dashiki. Probably 2 to 3 out of the 5 days, I'm usually in a dashiki. I have a wardrobe of dashikis. But again, I do that to help them connect and to help them understand. And we do a lot of lessons on self-esteem and so forth and so on. Again, because the boys that I serve are black and brown boys. They're black and Hispanic boys. That's who I serve. So if you're doing it from the female side, which is so needed, because again, women, it's one thing we get beat down with race, but you all get beat down with gender and race.
And community. Right.
Right.
Because the black woman, as much as she is disrespected by everyone, the black woman will take care of everyone.
Correct.
When I think about the definition of love, I learned about love from the black woman in my life. From my mother, my grandmother, right? And the black women I'm constantly meeting. And I want to really say thank you to all the black women, but also thank you to you for modeling for those young men what leadership looks like. Because a lot of us are afraid of the libations or afraid of creating an altar. And in Sister Talk group, I've been teaching me again, like the ancestry, and just watching how some of the members have been driven bigger. Like we have one of our members, she's full on in her practice around, ancestral intelligence, and she's doing a lot of teachings around the Ori, Sharon Ashman. And we have so many of our members now actually integrating ancestral knowledge systems as a foundational part of their work. Because if there's one thing I often say, Mark, before I'm gone from this earth, I want my work to be a representation of the cultural brilliance and the ancestral wisdom that our ancestors left behind. Because those wisdom codes, they were actually designed for us for all the times that we are, like, especially right now, what we're going through right now.
Correct.
We have the wisdom codes to manage it, to deal with it. So you modeling for the young boys and teaching them and creating a safe circle for them to actually learn to pour the libations, for them to say ashe, for them to understand that even the word amen came from Aman, came from our
Correct.
language, right? All of that we need to share it and expand. And for those who may be uncomfortable modeling and embodying, I want to remind them of a quick, neuroscience, a tip. Like, the brain is not comfortable with newness. The brain is not comfortable with what it doesn't see modeled, right? This is why we have to show up and model our cultural inheritance to each other.
Correct.
Because if not, we will always be uncomfortable. Because where would you see it?
That's great. And see, that was Akbar's point. That was his point about, see, if you come into my office, if you were to walk in my office, there is no question, no doubt, this is a black man's office. And again, there is no shame in my game with that, because why should you feel uncomfortable with everything I have surrounding me that is attributed or associated with being African American or black, and not expect me to feel uncomfortable when I come into your office and everything is attributed to whatever your culture group is.
Yeah,
so
and that's okay, because we're telling you that's okay. All we're saying is, let's expand.
Yes.
And let's put the and.
Yes.
Right? Let's add and.
If you come into my office, it is surrounded by blackness, and it has nothing to do with me being racist. I don't have nothing. It is all about me. Again, we talk about affirming, because there are days when I'm in my office and I'll be like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And I'll look up at a picture of Malcolm X. I'll look up at a picture of Martin Luther King. I'll look at a picture of Nelson Mandela. I'll look at a picture of I have the I'm trying to think of the, because I'm an AV geek. I'm a part of Bessie Coleman. I'll look at a picture of all these people, Gandhi. All these people are in my office hanging, surrounding me. Coretta Scott King. Like I just told you about that quote from Coretta Scott King. I have all these people surrounding me that I can look up and say, you know what, they can do it. If they did it, I can do it. The other thing you were talking about with Du Bois, because this is all boys school, is a leadership school. When I first got there, one of the biggest complaints by the boys was, you know what, they talk about our mothers too much. And they were talking about their classmates. I said, well, I know how to handle that. So the first meeting I had with Du Bois, we went over how we will respect our queens. That all of our females in here, they are queens, and your mothers are a queen. So therefore, when you're talking about each other's mother, you're disrespecting a queen. So that's kind of how the way we operate in terms of, if anyone talks about a mother, the first question is, what do we say about our queens? We won't disrespect them. Were you talking about his mother? Yes. What did you do? I disrespected a queen. That
and you're disrespecting yourself.
That's correct.
Right? And you're also disrespecting yourself. And again, going back to why I wrote this article, because I really wanted us to remember that when we disrespect each other, we're disrespecting ourselves.
Yes.
We're disrespecting the young girls who are looking up to us. We're looking for a better model of what it means for us to engage in the practice of sisterhood. And in our Sister Talk group, and that's, I'm currently working on my book right now, looking at the practices of sisterhood and the wisdom that comes with the practice of sisterhood. Because when you look at the ways that we treat each other,
correct,
it's an indication of how we treat ourselves. Because how we treat each other is how we treat ourselves at home in our bodies, our home in our physical home spaces, right? You will not disrespect someone if you're not used to disrespecting.
Correct.
Yourself. Disrespect becomes a practice, right? That's why it's easy for us to disrespect someone else. So anyone that disrespects another woman or another person, because you're very comfortable disrespecting yourself. That's why, when I think about wisdom codes, I go back to the work of, Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks. And, with my practice, Mark, I actually write letters back to them. I'm like, dear ancestor, you know that quote you talked about, how we don't love? I'm like, here's what we're doing in Sister Talk. Here's the practice that we have seen. Here's what we're learning about vulnerability, especially in the time that we're in right now. The time we're in right now, sometimes loving ourselves, or like you said, that message that if I affirm my blackness, it means I'm empty something. It is so psychologically violent, Mark. It has trickled down to us not even learning to love ourselves, because we think loving ourselves is a violent act.
Correct.
That's why it's so easy for us to be disrespectful to others. So a lot of my work, sometimes people ask me, Karlyn, you do quite a number of things. You have your private practice where you train clients. You have your Sister Talk group. I have journals. I have notebooks, because mindset alchemy is the number one practice that I always encourage people. I say, start with your mindset. Where are you operating from? Because if you're operating from the mindset of the imposed identity of Blackness, it becomes easier for you to disrespect not just your culture, but each other. But when you're operating from the mindset of ancestral wisdom or creative capital or of knowing who you are, I'm not saying that we will never disrespect each other. What I'm saying is that we will be more careful and more loving. And even when we have caused harm, we will understand that it's our responsibility to ensure that we repair the harm and we build better bridges of trust with each other.
No, absolutely
right. We forget that the inherited distrust that we have with each other or against each other, it's not ours.
Correct.
It belongs to the colonial narrative.
Correct. There is.
We got to give it back.
I mean, correct. It's a wonderful segue into where I was going to go with you based on what you were saying. There's a song by the group Sounds of Blackness. The title of it is Royalty. And these are the lyrics to the song. It says, born with two strikes against you, trapped in poverty, generations of injustice and inequality. Ancestors changed the world, though they came in chains. In you the strength it holds lives and still remains. You're mighty and majestic, descendants of kings and queens. Royal blood flows through your veins, children of the dream. So hold your head up high, keep reaching for the stars, no matter what. I know you can take it, no doubt about it, you're going to make it. Royalty, you are royalty. You got a message from above. You ain't no thug. You're royalty. Brother, you're a king. Sister, you're a queen. Children of the dream. If you've never been told, time for you to know you're royalty. That's one of my favorite songs by them.
Oh, I love that. That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
It is. I mean, and it's like,
and we need to keep saying that.
Yeah, and back to the affirmation again. Yeah. We have to. Yes, I have, and again, I have no problem with saying I'm royalty. I'm a little quirky, but I'm not. In other words, that's how passionate I am about what we're talking about. I have no problem with saying I'm a king. I have no problem saying with these boys that I'm serving that they're princes. No problem that the women or the females in the building are queens. I have no problem using that kind of language.
Yes, and the last thing I'll say around, this whole work around the self-friendship and self-love, I think a lot of us need to go back to the practice of self-friendship.
Yes.
Because if you understand, neurons and mirror neurons, and we're all atoms, and we're all just, mirrors of each other and energetic expressions of each other in human bodies, then we know how much power our words hold. We know how much power our thoughts hold.
Correct.
This is why a lot of the work that we do, it's all about reframing. And again, we have so many brilliant wisdom codes and narratives for all the Black women who have taken the time to write those books, who have taken the time to put out their research and their papers. For me, my biggest panic is, man, I'm getting older, and I actually learned all of this, like I said, when I moved to Canada, 20 years ago. I actually started my private practice about 8 years ago. But before that, while I was still working full-time, I still started Sister Talk, and I invited women over. It started out as a meeting in my home before we appeared on Oprah's Live Class, and we've had a few international circles and events and so forth. And we actually had our first event in the U.S. in Louisville with a group of incredible women that I met through Giants of Africa. And bringing women together so we can not just discuss, but we can actually affirm each other. All of that practice, to me, there's an urgency for us to practice it. Every single day you wake up is an opportunity for you to affirm yourself, for you to love yourself, and for you to do that for another person. To me, the greatest gift we can give to each other is to see each other.
No, you're absolutely right.
More, affirm each other more.
Yes.
If, for example, if Dr. I is doing something great, don't think she is doing something great. Tell her.
Yes.
Send her a note. Write on her LinkedIn post. Let's leave strings of love, strings of wisdom. So yes, like I said, there's a lot of distraction and noise right now with quote unquote, using DEI. Anybody who's talking about anti-DEI, you're anti-humanity. You're against your own moral code.
That is correct.
I can't sit and argue with you about seeing your own humanity or even ask you to see mine when you can't even see yours. right?
No, absolutely right.
My work is to affirm the people who need the reminder, starting with myself. And by extension, I do that for others. So I hope people are hearing me when I say to notice the distraction, don't get distracted. I'm not saying don't talk about it, don't get involved, but get involved with the wisdom codes of your ancestors. Get involved with the knowledge that our ancestors have been here before. It may look different today because we're at different time, different language is being used, but hey, they've given us the codes. And this is also why I created Kofa AI.
I'm glad you went there because that's where I was going next. Talk a little bit about that. Tell us what that is and talk a little bit about that.
So Kofa, going back to growing up, Mark, I was so hungry for knowledge of self or from the lens of our ancestral wisdom or cultural inheritance. And there was very few. Even our schooling system in St. Lucia, very colonial-driven, Eurocentric-driven. I mean, we were saying that Christopher Columbus discovered St. Lucia. I didn't learn a lot about my ancestors or our cultural inheritance. A lot of the books we learned from, again, those books were written by Europeans or from a Eurocentric lens where they got grants and they came to our country to write about us. Again, the narrative was not written by us.
Correct.
So over the years, a lot of the research that was done and the articles I've written tons of articles and programs. With the onset of a lot of folks asking me for, Karlyn, can you mentor me? And can we have a training over here? Can we do this? And I'm one person, right? But with the onset of AI, what I've done is I've taken my IP, my proprietary IP, the frameworks that were designed around ancestral leadership, around the EQ Clarity Coaching Program, and I put this in the database and designed my own AI coaching platform that is rooted in, for example, when you think about your value system or your purpose, how do you center them on art principles? I mean, we know it's there. We know, like Ubuntu, I am because you are. We understand that, right? We all understand the concept of, Ujama and Ujima and unity. We get all those concepts. We've heard the word Senkofa, but what does that look like in practice? What does that look like as centering my daily activities or who I am from that lens? So Kofa AI is an AI-powered, human-supported mentorship and coaching platform that's rooted in ancestral knowledge systems, emotional intelligence, and neuroscience. So basically what it is like, you're going to be talking to me, but not me, right? You're going to be talking to the AI platform.
Right.
You can ask it any questions that you want. If you want to be coached by it, you can. And for people who will be registering in our Sister Talk and our EQ Clarity Coaching Program, you'll also get the coaching certification version of Kofa AI, where you can now get coached every day. You get up 2 o'clock in the morning, you have a question, you can just ask Kofa AI.
All right, now.
That is coming soon. Right now, we're working on the public-facing version, and we're hoping to have it ready by the end of March.
All right. Well, when you said something a couple minutes ago about words being powerful, we talk for the rest of the afternoon or the rest of the morning and afternoon, because I say that just about every week about the power of words. You and I may have to connect offline because we'd have a really good conversation. Matter of fact, when you get your book done, you can come back on and let's talk about your book. I'll have you back on here because I could talk to you for the next couple hours or so because I want you to get into the whole thing about the glass cliff. Because we know about the glass ceiling, but for women, there's this thing called the glass cliff. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to have you back on so we can continue this discussion because this is the intersect for me. And when I say this, it's probably going to sound a little off, but I love being black and I love women. So the intersect of the two of those is, and again, like I said, I have all daughters. I have all girls. And so I have no problem with wanting to see them and any other woman for that matter doing the absolute best. The other thing is that's a group, women in general, and in particularly black women, that's been marginalized. So I am always for the underdog, always for those, and I'm always looking for them to do well. So I'm always looking for women to do well. I'm always looking for black folks to do well. And that does not negate to say I don't want the other groups to do well. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's been the oppression and the marginalization in order for our groups not to do well is all the more reason that drives me for us to do well.
Exactly. We are, one thing I love, or I would say the biggest wisdom code I received from Black from Black folks or from Black women is that we are the definition of love, and sometimes we don't always get affirmed or we
Correct.
get celebrated for it. And I want to read a part of the article, Mark.
Yes, again, please. I always love for the authors to read it because you all can put the inflections and the emphasis where, and if I'm reading it on my own, I might put different, emphasis on different parts. I love the authors to do that because the audience can hear exactly as the author meant it. So yes, please read.
And for COFA AI, we actually have different coaches. I actually have a coach for sisterhood and for Black women. As you read in my bio, we did a survey, a study in partnership with York University on understanding psychological safety in the workplace from the Black women lens. And this was something I had to fund myself because when I tried to get funding for it, the response I got was, why are you focusing on Black women? Why don't you focus on all women? And it really pissed me off. We did a small study, and my dream, and I have big dreams, Mark.
Right.
A small company, it's just myself, and I have consultants that I work with, but I have some big dreams. And
I know that's
in this
right.
article, here's what I wrote: an ancestral legacy of leadership. For every Black woman listening, this is for you. As Black women in leadership, we carry the weight of our communities, but we also have the strength of our ancestors. Our leadership is rooted in innovation, cultural wisdom, and transformation, from policy to academia to activism. The obstacles we face only strengthen us, and our responsibility is to pass on the knowledge, power, and love we've inherited. Your contributions are immense. You are a force of nature, a visionary leader where innovation capital, cultural wisdom, and transformational leadership are changing the world. Even when the outside world doesn't recognize your efforts, know that your work is divinely impactful. Stand tall in knowing that you are seen, celebrated, and loved for who you are, for what you've achieved, and the legacy that you are creating. In grace, love, and family, sisterhood. From the bottom of my heart, to all of you listening, thank you.
Well, thank you. As a matter of fact, for folks in the listening audience, if you want the full versions, it's on The Researcher, uwpbooks.com/THE-researcher. If you go to uwpbooks.com and just kind of peruse it, you can find your way around it. But what Karlyn is reading from is her article that she wrote in The Researcher. And so if you go there to The Researcher, all different kinds of topics are there. You can look and read. And again, enlighten yourself, because that's part of the issue too. It's like we need to enlighten ourselves. We need to affirm ourselves, and we need to educate and enlighten ourselves as well. And certainly if you go to the UWP website, you can do just that there. Karlyn, this is what I do for the last part of the interview. I give you the opportunity to promote. You can promote anything. You can promote your business. You can do anything. The only thing you cannot say is a dollar amount. The only thing you cannot say is pricing in dollars or how much it costs. But anything short of that, I'm going to shut the mic off for the next couple of minutes, and you have the opportunity to promote, shout out, or anything you'd like to do, and then we'll be done. And I'm definitely going to have you back. And like I said, I'll have to email you, and we'll have to exchange phone numbers, because I can definitely text you some stuff and vice versa. So I'm going to shut the mic off, and I'm going to hold you to that St. Lucia trip, too.
Absolutely.
But in any event, I'm going to shut the mic off, and this is your chance to promote.
Thank you.
Whenever.
Hey, everyone.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Please check out my self-love coloring books, my journals and planners at thesuccesssystem.com. And if you're looking to host a private Sister Talk Circle, gather all your girlfriends. Head over to KDPMEquityInstitute.com. You can also purchase a membership where you can get access to not just a lot of what I talked about, but you'll get some coaching videos. You'll get the Ancestral Leadership program. And also, I'm happy to come over to wherever you are in the world to host a private circle for you and your girlfriends. We can focus on our Dream Bigger framework and toolkit. And I'm really looking forward to also hosting a leadership session for your leaders or your C-suite as well with our Leap to Equity programming. So just head over to KDPM Equity Institute and book a session with me. And I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you.
All right. Well, I love what you do. I applaud you for what you do. Bless you, or as we say, ashe. Yes, because like I said, if it ever was needed, if there ever was a time where what you're doing is needed, it is now. And unfortunately, based on the direction we went in, it has gotten exacerbated. And it's not just, I mean, I get the whole, because like I said, when you and Camille were saying the same thing, in many instances, it's us pulling us down.
Yes.
And so that gets even crazier, but that goes back to the psychological slavery. So I'm definitely going to have you back. I'll stay in touch. Thank you so much for rising early with me. I do record the show. I put it up on my YouTube channel as archives. So for those who did not choose to rise with us early, they can go back on my YouTube channel and they can hear the whole interview again.
Yeah.
Once I send you the links, you free to share them out however you'd like. They're yours. I don't get into copyrights and trademarks and all that kind of stuff. Once I send them to you, please blast them out to as many people and places you can.
I will. And it was such a pleasure and honor to speak with you. Thank you for all that you do. And yes, I'm looking forward to a follow-up chat. Yes,
because there's a lot of alignment there in terms of, particularly with this ancestry piece and the energy piece and the power of word piece. There's a lot there. Yes, for sure. All right. All right. Have a wonderful day. Grand rising to you. And wonderful day, week. And I'm definitely going to be in touch.
Sounds good.
All right.
All the best.
Thanks. Take care now.
Take care.
All right.